everybody to the breakout session on the afternoon of the first day of the Fleet Europe Summit 2020. We hope you have all been enjoying the program till now. Interesting lineup, some interesting exchanges and discussions. So we are about to launch the following breakout session: From Data to Reality, Electrification Can Make a Difference. And ALD tells us they've got the proof. So this session is brought to you by ALD with also a contribution of Vinli. So we are welcoming the following speakers, of which we still are waiting for Mark Hayder, which is the CEO of Vinli Automotive. Quite sure he will arrive quickly. But from ALD Automotive, we have Annie Pin. Welcome, Annie. You're the CCO of ALD.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Welcome. And we have Benjamin Huvet, Senior International Consultant for ALD. Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you today.
All right. So, a word for the participants of this session. During the presentation, we encourage all of you to use the chat function, which is on the right of your screen, to share your questions for our speakers. At the end of the presentation, if time allows it, we will present these questions to our speakers so that they can answer them. For those questions which will not be answered, we will request you to connect with the ALD delegates through a direct chat. Hello, Mark.
Hello, everyone.
I'll just pause a little minute to welcome Mark. Hello, Mark. Well, we've just launching the introduction for the breakout session. We've welcomed all the participants, Mark, and of course, we welcome you as well. We hope you have another time zone, if I understood it correctly. So thank you for doing the effort. That's great. So as I already mentioned, Mark, you are the CEO of Vinli Automotive. Welcome. So I was explaining towards the participants that they would share their questions through the chat function. I will list them and try to raise them at the end of the presentation if time allows it. And otherwise, they can reach out to all of you with the, let's say, the networking possibilities in the tool, or they can go towards the exhibition booth in the village of ALD to share their questions with the delegates of ALD. So that's mainly what I had to share before launching the breakout session. One more thing, very important, is that 5 minutes prior to the end of the breakout session, I will join you again. That will give you an indication of the time if your presentation is not ended yet, and I will help you moderating the Q&A. Well, that's it from my side. I wish you, of course, all of you, a very interesting presentations. And so now I leave the floor to Mark, Annie, and Benjamin. Have a nice presentation.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Just sound check. Is this, you guys can hear me? Yes.
Yeah, all good, Mark.
Perfect. Good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending today. We've got some pretty exciting analytics and statistics to share with you. As I mentioned, my name is Mark Hayder. I'm the founder and CEO of Vinli. Vinli is we are a partner for ALD, and we've worked together over the last few months on an interesting study that we're very excited to share with you today for the first time. So let's start with the first slide, Benjamin, please. You can just flip. Yeah. So let's start with electrification. Everyone talks about electric vehicles and and all the potential of electric cars, but you can't talk about electric vehicles without range and anxiety. So I want to start with just defining range and anxiety a little bit, and so just as this concept of range and anxiety is just evolving over time. The better electric vehicles are becoming, the more range you're getting in electric cars. Obviously the range and anxiety definitions start to change. So as it stands today, if you look at most of the vehicles that are being produced by the manufacturers today, you're starting to see in all the studies and surveys, you start asking, two potential drivers or purchasers of electric vehicles. We're starting to see that the range and anxiety starts at the 200 miles mark, or the equivalent of 320 kilometers. This is where people start having a greater sense of anxiety around doing their day-to-day trips, and that's why you're starting to see a lot of the new vehicles that are being manufactured in battery technology is starting to enable breaking that specific barriers. You can go to the next slide, Benjamin, please. So what I wanted to do is to start seeing is that to do a study based on actual data, basically like how many of the drivers that are on the road today actually drive more than 200 miles per day. So most of the studies have been done so far. It's either surveys of asking drivers what they think they're driving, how many miles they're driving every day. But we didn't see many studies actually using connected vehicle data to really quantify that how many the actual driving behaviors in terms of trips and mileage over a specific country or specific region. So what we ended up doing, we used around 10,000 vehicles in the UK, and we ran analysis on these 10,000 vehicles over the last 6 months pre-COVID and also through the period post-COVID. And we started seeing is that 69% of the vehicles, they do not drive more than one trip per month that is more than 200 miles or 320 kilometers. So let that sink in. It's like almost nearly 70% of the drivers on the road in the UK do not drive more than 200 miles a day, more than once per month. There's one trip per month. If you increase, and interestingly, if you increase that range to 250 miles, that percentage jumps into 86%. So if you think about it, for most of the drivers on the road, they probably need one trip a month or one day a month that they need that range to go beyond the 320 kilometers. So if a company or a leasing company or a mobility provider could provide a car or a vehicle once per month for that driver, these drivers will never have an issue with range moving forward. So after we saw that, we said, okay, well, let's just look at the analysis of driving behavior after COVID or during COVID and during the lockdown. And also let's just see how carbon emissions are actually taking place pre-COVID and post-COVID. If you look at this graph, and this is just based on the 10,000 vehicles that we had in the UK, obviously you start seeing, the 6 months prior to COVID, you see the first dip happened during the holidays because people don't drive much during the holidays. You see, that is the dip, so you can kind of get a sense of kind of like the actual lockdown or driving behavior and carbon emissions throughout the year when you don't have a lockdown and a normal behavior. And usually you see the biggest dip around the holiday season or for Christmas, and that's why you see that in December. And then you go into, and the average emissions across these 10,000 cars was around 90 tons of CO2 per day. And then you go into the lockdown in March, and then you see that big dip going all the way down. And you can see that, after that, the emissions dropped down to 27 tons of CO2 per day. So it's almost like it cut down almost 70% of emissions across these cars when the lockdown happened. Now, obviously, you can start seeing people after that, start to cheat a little bit and start drive a little bit more and not stick to the lockdown, framework as much. But you can see the biggest dip when people actually stuck with their lockdown and stayed at home. That dip was around 20. It reduced emissions by almost 70%. So we ran a simulation, off of that. What if we convert? If you can go to the next slide, Benjamin, please. What if we actually go and convert the vehicles that actually can convert? It's not a pipe dream. It's not like, oh, let's just go convert all electric cars. Let's just convert the vehicles that we can. We have an actual path using the technology and the cars we have today, and the services that are available today. Let's use that as a benchmark. And if we convert them to EV, what will the impact be, on the environment? So if you look at the map on the left side, you can see kind of the pre-COVID emissions kind of map across the UK, and you can see where it's like fairly dense around the cities, and then during the suburbs and the urban areas, it just start diminishing. But then if you do that and run a simulation, you can see that the EV switch, if we actually do the EV switch of all the vehicles that can convert to EV today, you can see that the drop goes down to 28 tons of CO2 per day. And that is significant. If you think about it, it's just using the technologies and the services and available vehicles that we have today. We have a path to drop and reduce CO2 emissions of cars on the road down to the lowest level that our planet witnessed during the lockdown that we had due to COVID. And obviously on the map on the right, you can see kind of that significant impact. So obviously, if you think about it, is that the nice thing about EVs is that number one, we all know that they're better for the environment, and this slides and study shows that. Number two, we can see that significant portion of the cars we have on the road today can convert to EV using the technology. So it is possible. So it has a great impact on the environment. It is possible. The main question is how? How can we do it? If you can go to the next slide, Benjamin. So looking at the actual, the vehicles that are now driving and doing these trips, if you run an analysis across them, you can see actually for any car that is ICE-based, there is almost an EV equivalent for that. So the actual availability of options starting to become more and more abundant, and you can actually start covering a different range of car vehicle makes and models, and type. So with that, we've got someone who lives and breathes this every single day, and is going to walk you through how this can become a reality. How can we convert a fleet of vehicles from ICE to EV? With that, I'll give the mic to Benjamin.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, and very, very interesting study that you have realized in the UK. And as you mentioned, when we talk about EV, there are a lot of good news that are coming with these topics. And one of the good news as well is that we are currently evolving in a very favorable context when it comes to electrification and when it comes to fleet transformation. And if we take the example of Europe, with the implementation of WLTP and the European Union pushing a little bit the bounds in terms of CO2 targets to, let's say, push a little bit also the OEMs to develop more green vehicles and green powertrain, the offer on the market is becoming more and more wide and generous. So that's positive news. All the post-COVID measures as well, as you have demonstrated, Mark, the lockdown has brought a kind of awareness on the environmental side, and then it has enabled the governments in many countries in Europe to unlock some incentives that are quite significant when it comes to electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid vehicles as well. And it comes also with some ambitious targets and investment on the charging network density. And that's also, we know, is the key, one of the key factors if we want the electrification to be a success. And then, as you mentioned as well, I mean, the technology improvement is something that is moving day after day. We are talking about battery technology, which enable the vehicles to have better ranges than it used to be like 2 years ago. But we're also talking of cost production of the vehicles, and the gap between an ICE and an EV is slowly but surely getting bridged. And we hope that when we look at the trends, that this gap will be fully bridged by 2024 or 2025, which means that the price of the vehicles and the electric vehicles will also go down and will be aligned with the list price of the ICE equivalent. And this generates a lot of readiness in Europe, and many countries are now ready to start the transition to electric vehicles. And we will not talk only about countries like Norway, France, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, who are the most mature ones, but we are enlarging the scope of countries that are today ready for this electrification. And then, when you look at all those good news, and especially the ones that Mark, you have presented, and our capabilities now to understand the different usages of the vehicles and what are the real needs of the driver, not only on what they say, but also on what they do. And if you also aggregate this approach with the driver surveying that we can do at consultancy level, then you have the ability to shape the fleet profile in a different way that it is today. And you have the ability to project yourself in the future and see how your fleet transformation will evolve and what will be the impact on your fleet. Then it comes obviously with full TCO calculations on the different powertrains, because we also know that one powertrain doesn't fit with all the needs. So you have also to think about the different mix of powertrains you can include in your fleet. But it also enables to draw some strong projections and accurate projections on where the cost of your fleet will land in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, based on the different scenarios of electrification pace that you can have in your fleet, also depending on the strategy of the companies, because some of our customers want to be carbon neutral by 2025, some want to be zero carbon emission by 2030, and this has also to be taken into consideration. And when you think about driver usages, and when you understand the driver usages, you can also push the bounds of the mobility and consider that maybe some alternative mobility packages could be introduced instead of the standard company car as it is today. And this can come like we have with the ALD switch, meaning that a small electric vehicles for the day-to-day business needs, and a quota of days of short-term rental that are also allocated to the driver for the private usage. And this is also a way to balance the company strategy with also the driver needs and the driver satisfaction, and preserve the attractability of the company and retain the talent in the companies. And this always come also with CO2 evolution projection, because we know that it's also something which is very important for all of you. So once we've done that, we said at the beginning that we have the proof that electrification can make a difference. But I wanted also to share with you today is that, and it's a real study that we've run for a French customer. So it's a small piece of the study, as you can imagine, but just to show you that despite the beliefs that we have and we hear on a daily basis that electric vehicles is too expensive, the TCO of electric vehicles are much more expensive than the ICE equivalents, etc. We have done this study on a 20,000 kilometers per year basis, and we have compared similar vehicle. So here you have the Volvo XC40 in the petrol version, EV version, and PHEV version. And what you can see here is that this full TCO, which includes all the services that a leasing company can provide to its customer, including insurance, fuel, etc., tires, maintenance, combined with all the taxes related to the powertrain and the fuel cost or the energy cost, I would say, we see that petrol is now more expensive than the equivalent vehicle on the EV or plug-in hybrid. And it's even more true with the plug-in hybrid if it's used in a proper way. And it comes with a strong reinforcement of the car policy of the company. And the also very good news is that if you think a little bit out of the box and you provide alternative mobility solutions than the switch I talked about earlier, you can also see that your TCO from a petrol vehicle to a switch solution. So here it includes a Peugeot E2008 plus 60 days of short-term rental per year. You can have a TCO decreasing by 34% on a monthly basis. So that's also the key message that we wanted to share with you today, is that, okay, there are a lot of enablers on the market today for electrification. And if we talk about purely cost and TCO, then it does really make sense to do the switch right now and to be opportunistic with all the positive measures and positive environment we have today related to electrification. So now I will leave the floor to our Chief Commercial Officer, Annie Pin, who wanted to also to share with you a little bit more about ALD strategy when it comes to electrification.
Hey again, everyone. So it's super nice to be with you. So I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of ALD. I also happen to be the exec sponsor of our EV program. And what I suggest is that I'll just do a very quick wrap up so we can have plenty of time for your questions, hopefully. I don't know about you guys, but I got quite excited about Mark's and Benjamin's presentation. There's plenty of sessions about electrification, that we know. So we thought, okay, let's try to do something different. Let's actually base ourselves on real cases, real calculation, real data, try to bring something new on the table and hopefully create something like a small wow factor. And that's actually exactly what we will commit to do in the future in ALD. We'll keep on pushing, we'll keep on innovating, we'll keep on investing big time in electrification. And as the largest leasing company in Europe, we think that it's actually more than our job to make electrification happen. It's about our social responsibility. And it's the only way we can leave a decent planet to our kids as well. What we do is that we manage 1.8 million cars today, and by 2025, if you followed our latest strategic 2025 plan, then we're talking 2.3 million cars. And 2.3 million, that's a lot of contracts to manage. And I keep on dreaming about how many trees we could save if we would actively transform our fleet. So, as I said, we'll be pushing electrification proactively with all the gunpowder we've got. And what does that mean concretely? It means very simply, make it simple, make it accessible. So both for companies and private individuals. So first, have an end-to-end product which reduces the complexity of the EV ecosystem and makes it as easy as a nice car. Then, of course, gets the correct advice with our consulting team, where Benjamin is sitting and he made you the demonstration of our expertise. And last but not least, invest in digital tools like you've just seen with Mark, which can actually help you also compare. How much money do I save going electric? How many grams of CO2 and how many trees? So I'll leave you with these numbers, and that's also going to be the final slide. If you can put me on, Benjamin.
Yes, it's coming.
Okay, so and what I'm going to show is actually our targets for the next couple of years. So by 2025, 30% of our new contracts will be BEV or PHEV. And by 2030, it will be 50%, so half of our production. And this 50% actually referred to pure EV, so 100% BEVs. And this is actually translating into a very significant minus 40% on CO2 emissions for all our new contracts in 2025. Looks like Benjamin has some struggle putting this on.
I have an issue. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we
hear
hear
you.
you.
No?
But never mind. It's quite simple figures, right? It's 30% 2025, 50% by 2030, and a minus 40% on CO2 emission already by 2025 on all our new contracts. So as you can see, these are super ambitious targets, very tangible, and they're really aiming at making a real difference. So, I mean, we know that electrification is a very hot topic, so lots of people make a lot of declaration, and so you could ask, what's the difference here? And the difference, for whatever it's worth, is that ALD is actually listed on the stock exchange. So these numbers that I've just given to you, they are not declaration of intent, but they are our actual commitment towards the financial market. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to cut it short, wrap it up, Green Revolution has started, and I really, really hope that you can help us make it happen. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Benjamin. I think Benjamin just left us. He's back. He's back. Hello, Benjamin. You're
Also,
back.
my apologies. I don't know what happened. My computer freezed totally. So
no
sorry.
problem. No problem. So we still have 3 minutes. So first of all, thank you for doing the presentation. Very interesting, indeed. We have a practical question regarding the presentation as such, the recording. So that was a question. If you agree regarding the content, we will indeed make that content available on our website. That's something which ALD needs to confirm after the event. Secondly, one question which was put into the chat function from Christoph Ruland from Autovista Group. How do you calculate the CO2 emissions of the 27 tons per day in the EV switch? Is that a question which you can answer directly, or will you go back to Christoph?
We don't hear you, Mark. I think you need to unmute yourself.
We can definitely answer that directly, Christoph. Good question. So, I mean, number one, what we ended up doing, just take into consideration that these cars that we did the study on are connected vehicles. So we are collecting data from the car around mileage, and a lot of vehicles, we're getting the actual miles per gallon per these vehicles. And for those that don't provide that, we're using the actual local governmental guidelines and averages per specific car. So we're using the formula, the normal formula around calculating the combination between distance, consumption, fuel type to produce the actual to calculate the CO2 produced from that car. Now, the specific question around the EV switch, what we ended up doing, these vehicles that actually can convert, that we saw that we can actually convert to EVs. There's a path to converting them to EVs. We actually went and calculated, saw the actual CO2 consumptions on those, and we took that out because there is no emission just from a car specifically. So this is the actual CO2 emissions from the car, not from the power getting into powering that vehicle. And we took that out of the equation, and that drops the actual emission down by around 70%. I hope that answers the question.
I think it definitely does. We need to close the session because the main stage will be launched in 1 minute from here. We had a question from Jürgen Freitag and from Matthias Bischoff. I trust that ALD, you can tackle these questions. We will send the questions to you after this session. So I would like to thank everybody for joining this session. Thank you, ALD. It was interesting. We hope that you will enjoy the remaining day today and tomorrow of the event. Thank you all, and see you again in the rest of the event. And now we'll go to the main stage for the next stage of the event. All the best, and see you later.
And David, can I just say something before we leave?
Sure.
For Jürgen and all the people who had some question, I will be on ALD booth at 4 o'clock. So if you want to come and ask the question, I will be happy to answer your questions.
Great, Benjamin. Thank you for that, and wish you a nice afternoon, and see you soon again.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.